I decided to tackle this massive backyard renovation, which included a 50-foot long deck. Can we get it done in a week? Let's find out. In part one of this amazing backyard transformation, we poured our footings, installed our ledger board, set our posts, and of course, installed this massive beam all the way across for proper support. But now that we have this taken care of, the next day we come back to a beautiful surprise of 84 lumber dropping off the rest of our material. After the material was situated, we had another team get together because we had more people that arrived, including Adam and Becca, which is very nice because we were going to have our hands full today. Number one priority was to get all the material into the backyard before it got too hot because it was going to get scorching today here in Tampa, Florida. Once we had all the necessary lumber in our backyard, we could move on to the second row of beams. These rows are to provide the proper support for the edge of our deck as well as our stairwell down to our beach. These beams were fabricated and installed just as we did our first, and please remember I did make up plans for this specific deck, so if you want to see exact measurements needed for this operation, then please check out the link in the description box below. Now that we're using composite material for our deck boards, that actually lasts longer than the joists themselves, and that's why it's so important to use some type of joist tape. We have larger rolls like this to go over our beams, and we have thinner rolls like this to go over our joists. So we just need to make sure we apply this to extend the longevity of our deck itself, because the joists are not going to last as long as a composite decking. Simple enough. One of the most important things of any deck is to make sure it's actually straight, and in order to do that, we have to do some math. Luckily, I have Pat to actually explain it because I personally use the 3-4-5 method, but this one works perfectly well also.
Right now we're getting this square lined up, a little bit of basic geometry. We're getting a 45-degree triangle, and actually when we get those two measurements lined up, that's how we know our point is and we're perfectly square. Get these joists in, rock and roll.
As Pat and Nick determine exactly where our first beam needs to be placed, Omar and myself are making sure that we have proper joists that are doubled up. By applying 3-inch galvanized nails in a W pattern all the way down this board, we have a very structurally sound joist that's going to be attached to our ledger board as well as our beams that we just installed. Galvanized joist hangers are attached to our ledger board, which we install with 1.5-inch long galvanized nails, but when we actually install our joists, we are using 3-inch long galvanized nails. For most deck projects, people tend to run the length of the board the long way of the deck, and that's actually not what we're doing on this project. We are actually running the length of the boards the opposite direction, which means that the ends of our board is facing the house as well as the water. And this is why you see Rachel and Becca attaching our joist hangers to our doubled up joists, not our ledger board, which is what you would normally see in this type of application. When we start installing our decking, you'll see exactly why we did it this way, but keep in mind that if you don't like this style and prefer the more common style, I am making 2 different versions of our plans so it can account for both styles. These joists are 12 inches on center, and as Pat and Omar proceed to install the remainder of our joist hangers, Nick and Christy are cutting and handing off the material directly to them for quicker installation practices. This is the really nice aspect of having a team together for this project, because if we didn't have a plethora of people on hand, this project was never going to be done on time. And also, I'm not the main one filming this project, which is very different for the style and creativity of a video like this. If you do want an extremely tutorial-based type video for a deck, I'll make sure and provide a link in the description box below. But for now, let's get to finishing up this deck. As we install the last row of joists, we're also installing blocking between our joists as well as blocking for our perimeter board. For this project, we do have a perimeter board that goes all the way around, which is not only eye appealing, but a great way to make sure you don't see any of the seams of the deck at any point in time. As we install the remaining blocking and the rest of the joists, it's time to protect all this beautiful hard work that we just did with our joist tape. As I noted earlier, this project is extremely important to install these days, especially when we're considering using composite decking, because the composite decking is now lasting longer than the lumber underneath it. And in order to make sure we have as long of a structurally sound deck as possible, we need to install a little bit of tape. So not all decks have a stairwell, but in this project we have to get down to this beautiful water. And on this project we have our stair stringers. And this is extremely important because we have to stay consistent all the way down. So last night I actually set up a laser level to distribute that line all the way down to our footings, and we could figure out exactly the height that we needed for our stringers to be perfectly laid upon. I actually made a template so we had a perfect transition from step to step to step, which was 7.5 inches tall, which is the rise, and 11 inches deep, which is the run. So we got one, we'd have to take care of another 4, but once those are done, we can get them in and get the concrete poured. When building a stairwell, you do want a nice consistency step pattern all the way down your stairwell, because if you don't, your feet and your mindset will actually realize if one step is off an inch or 2, and that might not be a structurally sound issue, but it will be an irritant down the road. As we wait for the concrete to dry, Adam starts installing our galvanized tie plates as well as some hurricane ties in order to make this deck even more structurally sound. As that's being done, Pat is up above and actually laying out our first deck boards. The perimeter board is the first board that needs to be installed, and the one that I always suggest doing first is the one that's going to be up against your house, or in this case, our concrete ledge. We are on a time crunch, and in order to make sure that this deck goes extremely quickly for installation, we're using this camo fastening system. The first system that we're going to be installing is this camo starter clip system, which goes right up against the edge of our board. And as long as these clips line up properly with the chalk line that we just snapped, we have a nice, beautifully straight board all the way across the deck. On the opposite side of this board, we're using camo edge deck screws to make sure we can fasten these boards down without penetrating the very top of it. We are mitering the corners at a 45-degree angle, and once we have the first board installed, we can move on to the second side perimeter board. I always suggest clamping down this second side perimeter board first before fastening, because that will guarantee that that board does not move on you during the fastening process. Pat just did an amazing job at having a perfect corner. This is a first mitered corner, and everything works off of that with our TimberTech decking. As long as that is square, we can run our boards right up against it, and with the clip system, have a perfect segment all the way across the deck. We're gonna make sure it's long so we can cut off the excess and make a picture frame at the very end right after that. So let's get to decking. The beautiful thing about this system is the fact that we can use their camo clip drive system, which we might personally joke around with, but nothing comes close to fastening this deck faster than this clip system. The clip fits snugly on the top of the joist, and there's actually a stainless steel plate that goes into the groove on both sides of each board. With this long orange camo clip drive system that connects into your standard drill, you're not only able to fasten each one of these fasteners down extremely quickly, but you're also able to do it while standing. Camo also has this lever locking tool that actually locks these boards into place before you fasten them down, and that's actually really nice, especially if you don't have so many helping hands available. But even if you do, it basically just makes sure that you have proper even pressure across the entire length of the board. This is really important because with a deck of this size and 50 foot long, we want to make sure the space in between each board stays consistent, because if we don't, then we might have an uneven piece at the very end.
Okay, we finally got some decking on. However, we have a nice dark rain cloud coming in, so we're taking a 5-minute break. Right, Rachel?
Take 5.
Take 5.
Take 5. We really did have some insane weather on this project, including a hurricane. Yes, a hurricane in Florida we had to deal with, but luckily for us, we didn't get hit hard here in the Tampa Bay area, so we were able to rock and roll in the very near future. But as you can see, someone got a little hot while he was waiting. We really did have to make things pretty lively and entertaining on this project, because after dealing with so many stressors on this project, we could not believe that we also had to handle a hurricane at the same time. But after another late night of hard work, we were able to get the vast majority of our decking installed, as well as our stair stringers. As Nolan and Omar start installing the treads, Pat and Scott start cutting off all the excess of our decking boards. In order to do so and to make sure we have as clean of a cut as possible, we use a track saw. This track saw by Craig not only provides an extremely straight cut, but it also accurately determines the depth that we need to cut, which is important because we don't want to cut too deep in this application and cut our membrane underneath. Keep in mind that we're also accounting for the picture frame aspect of this deck, which means that we actually have to cut deeper into our deck in order to fit the perimeter board all the way around. That means measuring the proper layout the very first time is extremely important to make sure these deck perimeter boards fit in perfectly the very first time. As Scott and Pat finish up the perimeter boards, we need to address what's going on underneath the deck, which includes quite a bit of extra framing and decking. With pressure-treated 2x4s being installed along the perimeter of the deck, and then enclosing that space with some TimberTech decking really did a nice job at providing a cohesive look for this entire deck, as you can see right here. We did leave a small opening underneath our deck in order to store paddleboards and any other hardwares with this wall control system underneath. With that taken care of, we have another obstacle in mind, which is the pavers. Yes, the pavers, because unfortunately the concrete substrate that our ledger board is attached to is uneven, which means that there is high spots and low spots, and in order to guarantee ourselves that we have a proper consistent transition between our pavers and our deck, we need to grind down the pavers. This took an extremely long time, but luckily Scott and Adam were on the job cutting these for hours on end. We applied a healthy amount of mortar on the backside of each paver, making sure that each one had a nice mortar bed to lay upon as it dried, so we could have a precise transition between our pavers and the deck. As that's being taken care of, we can move on to the railing, and for this railing, there's actually a combination element for the railing itself. We first install pressure-treated 4x4s with Simpson strong tie brackets and extremely long lag screws. We level out each post with composite shims, which Nicole and Becca make quick work of, and once each post is secured properly and level, we can move on to installing the sleeve. Now this is a TimberTech composite sleeve that goes right over our 4x4 posts. The sleeve system also comes with dedicated trim rings which completely conceal any hardware, as you can see here. There's a bracketing system that has to be applied at the very bottom as well as the very top, and that actually holds in place the channel that connects each post. Once the brackets are installed, we can then measure and cut our channels that are going to be placed right on top of these brackets. Each railing segment gets one at the very top as well as one at the very bottom, and as we're doing this, Omar starts installing our lighting. Now this lighting is actually placed at the very bottom of each post, as well as having an LED top cap at each post location. Once placement location is determined, you then pre-drill all of your holes and secure the base plate with a couple screws. The tricky part is feeding your electrical wire through this hole up to the very top of the surface, where it has to connect to the top cap as well as every other post location. As Omar takes care of the lighting, I start installing our cable bolt system. Now this is a very unique style system where it actually is a threaded insert that you thread into each post. You have to pre-drill your holes and install this stainless steel sleeve that should be installed every 3 to 4 inches. Once your inserts are taken care of, then it's time for your stainless steel wire. Now this wire needs to be cut to the appropriate length and then have a crimped sleeve attached to each end. Before you apply that crimp though, you do need to add a lobbed washer on both sides, which then actually fits into the keyholes that we just installed into our sleeve. Then with an Allen wrench, you make sure the wire is taut and you move on to the next section. As you can see, there is quite a lot of work that's involved in this entire project with so many different hands. One thing that was built, obviously, that we haven't talked about yet is this amazing TiKi Bar / Palapa. This is a kit system, and I want to know from you, do you want to see how this thing was assembled and installed? Please let me know in the comment section below, because I am interested, and if there's enough people that want to see it, I'll post about it. As you can see, this was an all hands on deck late night section of work just to make sure we were able to finish on time, because this was day 6 and day 7 was going to be still a full day of work. This railing really did turn out beautiful, but it is a very slow installation process, which is why the next day we were still installing. As I take care of the final straight run, we have a whole team of people taking care of the stairwell because that was definitely a complicated system. This really was an entire team effort because as we're taking care of the railing, we have a plethora of other people also finishing up our beautiful palapa and bringing in the furniture. We wanted a one-of-a-kind wow factor at this bar, so we brought in Jess the epoxy queen, who took care of these amazing epoxy countertops while working day and night as we were working day and night on the deck. We also had Ethan handcrafting these cedar lounge chairs just to make sure we had not only some comfortability, but some style as well. And with the last few pieces of furniture in, along with some cleanup and some helpful exterior design elements, we have one of the most rewarding projects that I have ever been a part of, because not only were we able to accomplish it in 7 days, but I was able to work with some truly amazing individuals both inside and out. It's quite amazing what you're able to accomplish within a 7-day period, and this is one project that I'm proud to say is truly one beautiful, sexy beast. Oh yeah,